Yeah, I don't know how you kept up with the flurry of activity, but your tweets were some of the best ways to follow this in real time because the information just kept on coming and people kept on talking and you couldn't believe what you were reporting. And yet here we are. And so, Brenden, when you look at this now and you hear from Chris Welch, Speaker of the House, and other people, but especially him, and he says two things that I want to know how you feel it connect. Number one, sooner rather than later, they're going to address this. But number two, there's not going to be a special session. So where does that leave this situation as far as Arlington Heights and the Bear Stadium are concerned?
Kind of leaves the Bears in limbo, honestly. I mean, it leaves them kind of where they were before, where they've been, quite frankly. I mean, as Speaker Welch mentioned, there's probably not going to be a special session. So they're not going to come back until October. And that happens sometimes. I mean, they call it a veto session, but really, you often can discuss issues over the summer and try to find compromise on things that couldn't get across the finish line in May. So I think that's what he was saying, that it's one of those issues that they couldn't find compromise on before they left. They'll talk about it in the summer, try to find some compromise, and hopefully come back in October and vote on something that can get agreement in the House with the Senate and get the governor's signature. Because as I know you had Senator Cunningham on earlier, it became pretty clear that this thing just kind of came together so late in the Senate. Saturday night the pilot collapses. Sunday, they come up with this public ownership structure that we didn't see bill language until a little before 10 o'clock on Sunday evening. The Senate didn't vote on it until I think it was about 3:30 in the morning.
Right.
And by that point, the House, I mean, it wasn't like a small amendment to the House bill. This is a complete rewrite, completely different concept. So they didn't get a chance really to read through it. The governor even said that he didn't read the bill. So I think they think if anything happens, it's probably going to have to be when they come back in October, after everybody kind of gets a chance to digest what the Senate did and see if that's acceptable to the House and if it's acceptable to the Bears. We don't even know if the Bears would find this arrangement acceptable. They've just said that they're going to continue on their same timeline of late spring, early summer, making a decision on a stadium.
You're listening to Mully and Haugh, 104.3 The Score. We're talking to Brenden Moore, Capital News, Illinois, and he joins us on the Plumbers 911 hotline. Plumbing emergency, call 1-833-PLUM-911, local 130 plumbers. Get the job done right the first time. So, typically we're sort of playing a little bit of a blame game here, trying to figure out what went wrong, why this couldn't work out. We know that the next meeting, it changes, right? They actually have to get more votes than they would have needed at this session. Do you have to make sure the votes are there if they're going? And we don't even know if the Bears will already cut a deal in Indiana, how they're going to handle things. Is there any expectation level of the Bears being patient about this?
Again, they said that they're going to stay on their same timeline of late spring, early summer. So I don't know what that means for the whether Illinois lawmakers will have time. All I know is that essentially, I don't think this was their intention, because clearly I think they tried to get something done, but couldn't get it across the finish line. But by not doing it, they've essentially called the Bears bluff. That, okay, you said that you're going to go to Indiana if we don't pass anything by the end of our session. Well, that's happened now. So it's your move, Bears. Are you going to go to Indiana now? Take that deal. And they very well could, but if they don't, I also think that they lose a lot of leverage
Sure.
in Springfield, because it's pretty obvious they want to be in Arlington Heights. I mean, I think you guys probably have better sourcing and connections with the Bears, but it doesn't take much to see that they would rather be in Arlington Heights. They want to get a deal in Arlington Heights. They don't would prefer not to go to Indiana. I think the NFL would prefer they not to go to Indiana, but they've kind of backed themselves into a corner where they might have to, even if they don't want to. And because there's no certainty that something can get done in Springfield. Senator Cunningham mentioned an hour ago that there were a lot of senators that didn't want to do anything.
Right,
And
right.
and even you hear the governor speak yesterday and Speaker Welch. They have bigger fish to fry, and so they are not going to move leaps and bounds, or they're not going to. It's not going to be like in 1988 when Governor Thompson and Speaker Madigan and Senate President Rock all kind of banded together to save the White Sox for Chicago. It just we're not in that type of environment. So I think it should be noted though that even though they are going to be in the veto section, there was no immediate effective date on this bill, which means that it technically wouldn't take effect anyways until next July.
Right.
So they would only need a simple majority in both the House and the Senate. So that's more doable. But again, you still have that issue of legislators who really don't want to vote for something to help the Bears. But we'll see if the legislative leaders and the governor can get that done.
Everyone's got their own version of this and perception, perhaps, but what role do you think that the back channel conversations between the Bears and the city of Chicago, which were confirmed by Senator Cunningham earlier today, what role did those play in this legislation being stalled or blocked?
I think it played a really big role. I mean, I think that it gave credence to what Mayor Johnson has been saying, and it gave enough of a window for or a crease for Chicago legislators to say, we want to back off this pilot concept and try to find a way where the Bears can stay in Chicago. Frankly, I think I mentioned this last week, but the Bears have done themselves no favors throughout this process. There's certainly a lot of blame to be thrown around. I'm sure the legislature and the governor and on that side are not blameless. But if you talk to people in Springfield, people that have been around who know politics, there's a name that keeps coming up as a common denominator for why the Bears have had so many issues, and that's Kevin Warren. That Kevin Warren has totally kind of bungled this process. I mean, he inherited a bad situation. I mean, the Bears had already bought the land. They kind of did things in I guess topsy turvy, opposite as you usually do in a stadium deal type of situation. But that he kind of made it worse, and it wasn't for lack of having good people on your team. I mean, the Bears have hired some of the best lobbyists that money can buy, and that know Springfield, but that only gets you so far when you don't listen to them. And the Bears throughout this process have not always listened to the people that know how to get stuff done in Springfield, and we saw that when they did their first, I guess, rendezvous with Chicago in 2024. Saw that, kind of how they handled some of the Indiana negotiations earlier this year. That upset a lot of, upset the governor, upset a lot of the folks in the legislature. Kind of, that statement that came out after Indiana passed their bill,
Right.
and then these back channels with Chicago. I mean, which, as Senator Cunningham has said, were more than just talking about their lease at Soldier Field, or were more than just lawyers talking. That this was more of a back channel of, well, if this thing doesn't work in Arlington Heights, and so I think just to be pardon my French, but these legislators, Springfield folks, they don't like to be jerked around. And I think there's a general feeling that the Bears have been jerking them around throughout this process, and that did not help them get what they want out of Springfield. Obviously, you did get a bill that passed the House, you got one that passed the Senate, but not the same bill. And I think that something could still happen. I mean, it could stop in the veto session, but there's nobody that's jumping to help the Bears here.
Brenden, it's interesting to consider what Kevin Warren may have done to offend the legislature or to divide the legislature. What did he not do? In other words, while we're talking about these mistakes, and these have clearly been reported, I'm wondering, you know, he wasn't there. He wasn't omnipresent. They didn't have him or George down in Springfield. Was that considered a misstep? You know, and in fairness, the governor wasn't there. I think I didn't see Senator Harmon there. I mean, there were people that you would think would be in the middle of something like this that weren't around.
You know, it's funny. I have a friend who was at the White Sox game last weekend, and he posted on his Instagram. There's a statue outside of White Sox Park of Governor Thompson,
Hmm.
who helped get the White Sox ballpark built. And so my friend rubbed his nose, saying, you know, good luck. Hopefully for the Bears, hope they get something passed. But they didn't, and you didn't see, back in 1988, you had Governor Thompson on the floor of the House, twisting arms, trying to get this across the finish line. You know, he was trying to get Republican votes. Speaker Madigan was trying to get Democratic votes. You had unified leadership. You had the mayor at the time was on board, and so they were heavily involved and got that done. But in this case, with the Bears, I mean, you don't really have unified leadership. Obviously, we've talked about how Governor Pritzker and Mayor Johnson, I mean, they say they personally get along, but politically they are not allies. They don't see eye to eye, especially on this issue, and that certainly hurt. The House and the Senate have been on different planets this session, not just on this, but I mean everything down to the schedule they couldn't get on in line with. So they were kind of on different planes on this. And then you get the Bears, where it seems like even within their leadership structure, there was not total unity. You know, again, Kevin Warren has been viewed as kind of not helpful in this process. But then, you know, you talk to people in the building, they'll say Karen Murphy is wonderful to work with, and actually trying to get something done. And so, you know, you have all this together, and the governor did say that, you know, he was in his office all weekend trying to work stuff out, and you know, some of this public ownership, I guess, structure kind of came out of discussions with him and folks in his office with the Senate. And so he's been involved, but like no one would say that he's kind of gone to the mat for this, or like, you know, really tried to make calls and twist arms. That he wasn't using his political capital on this. So I think that yes, the fact that, I mean, Scott Hagel, who's the Bears kind of their government relations guy, was in the building last week. So they had a person down there, but didn't have Kevin Warren down there. And so I think that you put that all together, where, I mean, you have you didn't have unified political leadership. The Bears, obviously, I mean, didn't have the biggest presence in the building last week, and didn't necessarily have a plan for how to get something done. I mean, sometimes, you know, to get legislation passed, you need to have like a solid plan. You know, you need to work your roll call, get the votes, and just throughout this process, they haven't really had a clear idea of what they wanted, and I think in the end, I mean, as you mentioned, you know, the fact that they did this back channel with Chicago really hurt them, because it undercut what they had been saying publicly, which is that it's just Arlington Heights or Hammond, when clearly legislators could see right through that, and it did not ring true to them. So there's a lot of reasons why this thing didn't happen, but I think a big part was that, yeah, the Bears, even within their own leadership, it seemed like they weren't unified on what exactly they wanted from the legislature and where they ultimately want to end up.
Great stuff.
Great stuff. Thanks a ton. Really appreciate your time, Brenden.
Terrific job.
Always a pleasure, guys. Thank you.
That's Brenden Moore from Capital News, Illinois.
Wow. A lot of good stuff
A lot of
there
good
as well.
stuff.